What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 16. Sleepers and studs. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 16. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So of course the studs on the slate, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Both those guys are the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. They both have good matchups, but they also have their playoff seed locked up. So you do question, how much they're going to be out there. Are they going to get a break? Are they going to put it all on the line? They're not going to want to risk injury. It's just hard to know with these games that have their playoff seed locked up how much effort they're going to put out there, if they're going to try some backup players or, not give it 100%. So, of course, both those guys in good spots, but they're expensive. They're coming off of, both of them had fantastic weeks last week. So, it just looks like a letdown game for me, for these guys. So, moving on here, those are the studs. But if you want a guy, he's not a stud by any means, but his salary is low, and I think he is in a great spot here this week. He is fighting for his playoff life. I like Daniel Jones from the New York Giants playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the second worst defense overall. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Daniel Jones has averaged 17.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 7.5 rush attempts per game. So he's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 17.9 fantasy points here in Week 16. And I like this pick because he's only $5,600 DraftKings salary, $1,800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Giants trailing by 4. So Daniel Jones has scored 10, 19, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 10, 4, and 12 rush attempts in those games. So this is also why I like this pick. He's got huge rushing upside and a great matchup, a good game script here, fighting for his playoff life. So I like Daniel Jones here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, now a sleeper pick at the quarterback position. Take a look at Sam Darnold from the Carolina Panthers playing the Detroit Lions, who have the absolute worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Sam Darnold has averaged 14 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 3 rush attempts per game. Going to be about 4% owned, projected at 13.7 fantasy points here this week. I'm going to bump that up to 16 fantasy points. He's got a fantastic matchup. So Sam Darnold is only $5,100 DraftKings salary, $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Panthers trailing by 2.5. So Sam Darnold has scored 13, 12, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 2, 4, and 3 rush attempts in those games. So the only reason I like this pick, low salary, low ownership, and the best possible matchup on paper. So I like Sam Darnold as a sleeper pick here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So the stud on the slate is Derrick Henry from the Tennessee Titans, playing the Houston Texans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Derrick Henry has averaged 21 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 21.1 rush attempts per game and 2.7 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 30% owned, projected at 23 fantasy points here in Week 16. He's $8,600 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 35.5 points scored in this game, with the Titans favored by three. So Derrick Henry has scored 29, 26, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 21, 17, and 11 rush attempts in those games, on top of 4, 5, and 3 pass targets. So fantastic matchup. The Tennessee Titans are also fighting for their playoff life. Houston Texans obviously eliminated. And I think Derrick Henry is going to run all over the Houston Texans. So he's by far my favorite running back stud on the slate. So I like Derrick Henry here versus the Houston Texans.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, now a sleeper pick at the running back position. Now, this guy could be considered a stud. He is a stud, but his ownership is so low that I'm putting him in the sleeper pick section here. So take a look at Nick Chubb from the Cleveland Browns, playing the New Orleans Saints, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Nick Chubb has averaged 18.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 18 rush attempts per game and 2.1 pass targets per game. So averaging over 20 touches a game, only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 14.6 fantasy points here in Week 16. I'm going to bump that up to 16 fantasy points. He's $7,700 DraftKings salary, only $200 more on FanDuel. Now, Vegas only thinks there's going to be 32.5 points scored in this game, so they have this as an extremely low-scoring game, with the Cleveland Browns favored by 3, and Nick Chubb has only scored 10, 8, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 21, 14, and 17 rush attempts in the last 3 games, on top of 2, 3, and 1 pass target. So Nick Chubb has been getting plenty of volume, 23 touches last game. If he continues to get 20 plus touches, and it's a middle of the pack matchup here, I know it's not a great matchup, and his salary is still up there. It's not that he's underpriced or anything. He's priced right about right, but he definitely has 20 plus fantasy point upside. And I think the play here is that he's only going to be about 2% owned. I mean, this is a guy capable of getting 3 touchdowns in a game and breaking the slate. So as a tournament play, I think he makes a lot of sense at that super low ownership. So I like Nick Chubb as a sleeper pick here versus the New Orleans Saints. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So the stud on the slate is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know it's St. Brown, but every time I see ST dot, I just say Street. I'm sorry. So Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions, playing the Carolina Panthers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown has averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.2 pass targets per game. He even gets close to 1 rush attempt per game, on the field for 77% of the snaps, going to be about 16% owned, projected at 17.7 fantasy points here in week 16. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game, with the Lions favored by 2.5. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown has scored 15, 13, and 38 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 10, 9, and 12 rush attempts. And he got, 10, 9, and 12 pass targets. And he got 1 rush attempt in either of those games, all 3 of those games in his last 3 games. So that adds to his fantasy upside a little bit. This guy's been playing really well, getting a ton of volume. Decent matchup here, pretty good game script. Just think that out of all these studs, I think he's in the one of the best spots here because the Detroit Lions are fighting for their playoff life. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown here versus the Carolina Panthers.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now my wide receiver sleeper pick is Amari Cooper from the Cleveland Browns, playing the New Orleans Saints, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Amari Cooper has averaged 15.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.2 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 84% of the snaps, only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 11.5 fantasy points here in week 16. He's 5,900 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Amari Cooper has scored 10, 6, and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6, 7, and 9 pass targets. So they have Deshaun Watson at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And Amari Cooper, only 6 pass targets last game, but his last 3 games, he's averaging 8 targets per game. So he's right on his season average for pass targets over the last 3 games. And this is another guy who I think just hasn't had a big game for the last 3 games, who was due for a big game here. So again, this is an ownership play at only 2% ownership. Now, I wouldn't play Nick Chubb and Amari Cooper. I'd either go Nick Chubb as a sleeper pick or Amari Cooper as a sleeper pick here versus the New Orleans Saints. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. One of the tight end studs that I like this week is TJ Hawkinson from the Minnesota Vikings, playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing tight ends. TJ Hawkinson has averaged 12 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.1 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 87% of the snaps, going to be about 18% owned, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here in week 16. He's only 4,900 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Vikings favored by 4. So TJ Hawkinson has scored 8, 13, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 9, 8, and 6 pass targets. So lots of volume for TJ Hawkinson. He got 17 pass targets in the last 2 weeks. And although the Minnesota Vikings do have their playoff seed locked up, I do expect TJ Hawkinson to continue to get a lot of pass targets. They brought him on midway throughout the season. So they're going to want him out there continuing to expand his knowledge of the playbook and perfect those plays. So I think he's in a great spot to get a lot of volume and have a big impact on this game. Low price tag. Now the ownership is high at 18%, but I think it's well justified here. He could easily be the top fantasy scorer on the slate at the tight end position. He could even beat Travis Kelce, who might get a little bit of a break here this week. Always want to keep your eye on that. So I like TJ Hawkinson here versus the New York Giants. Now, speaking of Travis Kelce possibly getting a break, this is 100% speculation, but if you take a look at the last 2 weeks, you can see Noah Gray from the Kansas City Chiefs has been getting some pass targets. So my sleeper pick at the tight end position is Noah Gray from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Now, Noah Gray has scored 6 and 8 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 3 pass targets in each of those games. Only going to be about 3% owned. He's $2,600 DraftKings salary, $2,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 10. So this is a fantastic matchup for Noah Gray. And I just think with the Kansas City Chiefs, they have their playoff seed locked up. Travis Kelce is their most valuable asset to protect. So it would make sense to give Noah Gray some extra pass targets in this game. And he's super low price, low ownership with the best possible tight end matchup on the slate. So I think he makes a fantastic sleeper pick here this week. So I like Noah Gray as a sleeper pick here versus the Seattle Seahawks.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.